That's Enough Out of You, a weekly podcast where you'll hear the truth, or at least a closer version of the truth than most of the bullshit that's out there. Here are your hosts, Bill Rader and Sean Kane.
Hello and welcome to That's Enough Out of You. I'm your host, Bill Rader.
And I'm Sean Kane.
And this is a weekly podcast where we discuss pretty much whatever the heck we feel like discussing. We talk about sports and history and sports history. We talk about pop culture. We talk about movies and TV and all kinds of fun stuff. Historical events, historical figures.
We talk about whatever we want, Billy, because it's our show, buddy.
And this week we're going to continue with talking about the Vietnam War. We started that last week in our first show of the new year. We're going to continue this week. Sean's got some more facts and some more research that he's done. So we're going to get into that a little bit later. But how you doing, Sean?
Good, buddy. Things are great, pal. How about you?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Pretty good. We had a pretty good weekend, pretty fun weekend. We attended the Penguins game last night. You and I went with our little guys and had fun. It was the teddy bear toss.
A lot of fun, Billy. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So it's nice what the local Penguins, the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins do is every year they do this, what they call teddy bear toss. They do it right around Christmas time. And as we're recording this, we're about a week away from Christmas. So what you do is you bring in your new stuffed animal and you hold on to it until the Penguins score their first goal. And once they do, everybody tosses their stuffed animal onto the ice. It was really, really cool just to see all the stuffed animals getting thrown onto the
ice. It was fun, and the kids had fun, and the two big kids had fun, Billy.
That's true. Me
and you, buddy.
We all had fun. We all had fun. And yeah, I always have fun when I go to the Penguins game. In fact, one of these days I'm gonna have somebody from the Penguins come on the show, just to kind of talk about what they're doing in the community. And I've already reached out to the team, and they said they'd be happy to have somebody join us on the podcast. So
that'll be great because they do a nice job. They really do. And that was a good thing for a good cause, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. So what else is going on? What's going on with you?
Same old, Billy. You know, I got into big news came out. President Biden released 13,000 documents, but from the JFK files. But they're still holding back, Bill. There's still about 3% that's still out there that they're holding back, and they're saying that they're holding it back because of national security.
So was this? Hang on a second. What was this? What is this? This is not the Warren, anything to do with the Warren report. This is what is?
No, this is mostly Bill. This is go ahead. What was that?
This is what, national security file. What is this exactly?
Most of them, Bill. Most of them are from the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which was a committee that was in the 70s investigating the JFK assassination and the Martin Luther King assassination, and a little bit of Bobby. And they came to the conclusion that JFK, you know, there was a conspiracy. And that's very rarely all the media talks about is the Warren Commission. But The thing is, the files from the House Select Committee was sealed. Most of them were sealed. So with the JFK movie that came out in 92, the Assassination Record Review Board, the AARB, it became a law that they had to release these documents. So the CIA was holding back these documents from the House Select Committee, a lot of stuff from their investigation, but it's also CIA documents. It's documents from other agencies, FBI. And I'll tell you, Bill, I'm going through these documents. I got the dump and we're going through them, and we're probably going to end up doing a podcast on it. Who knows, Billy? Maybe I'll even write a book on it, because I'm getting a lot of people busting me to write a book, and I've been going through them. And the thing is, they're not easy to go through. I mean, you know, these things, they come with a cover sheet, and there's a routing slip with it, and it tells you like where's it from, Like, is it from the House Select Committee on Assassinations to the CIA, or from the CIA to them? And then it tells you, what person wrote it and who did they write it for. And then it tells you who's read in on it. And the thing is, somebody's come in and you can't find the routing slip. You can't find the cover sheet. So you don't know who's really writing it. You got to go digging for it.
Mm.
Some of them are redacted.
Yeah.
The court law said there was supposed to be no redactions. And a lot of these are redacted. Some are hard to read because the print is either too dark or too light. So it's not easy to go through. And when I was switching through the TV, go ahead, Bill.
What is it, like copies of documents that they've posted, or the actual like?
It looks to me like copies, Bill. These are copies. I don't know if the original. I mean, remember, some of these documents are 50, 60 years old.
Yeah.
So they're old. They just look like they're run down. I mean, they're hard to read. I mean, I'll send you a couple, Bill, so you can look at them and see.
Mm-hmm.
But they're hard to read. And when they first got released, when the news broke that Biden was releasing these, I switched through the channels on the TV, surfing, and I see the big thing on CNN, Biden releasing JFK files. So I keep it on. And they have this hack come on. This guy just comes on and he says, I don't know who he was, but he says, I started reading the documents, and he said, I only read, 2 or 3 pages, but he said, I could tell you there's nothing of relevance in these documents. He says, but if conspiracy theorists, they want to go through them, they could waste their time. And he starts laughing, and I'm thinking, you pompous ass, you're telling me that you read 2 to 3 pages of documents of a 13,000 documents, and you read 2 pages, and you're telling me there's nothing in it? Like, Bill, some of these documents, they could be 1 page, or they could be 25 to 50 pages,
right,
on one document. So for this clown, this pompous ass to come on and say that, he went through a couple pages and there's nothing in it, like, it's just a total, it was a total hack job,
Yeah.
So that kind of aggravated me. And the other thing is, Tucker Carlson came on, and look, we call it like it is on this show. We don't try to pick sides and get into whether you like him or not, but when somebody does something, we're going to call it out. We're going to say, if we like what he did or we didn't like what he did. But Tucker Carlson had a piece on Fox about the JFK files, and I'm going to give him a lot of credit, because he came out and he said, look, we interviewed somebody that saw all the documents, including the remaining files that are still not released. And he said, we asked him point blank. He said, did the CIA kill JFK? And the guy said, I really believe they did. Yes. So I'll give him a lot of credit. Now, he didn't reveal the source. You could bash him on that. He didn't, give much information besides that, but I give him credit for having the guts to come out and say that and put that piece out there,
Well, Tucker Carlson's got guts, I guess you could say. Nothing else. All right.
Well, like, again, but like, whether, you don't like him, you don't like him, you know what I mean? But for me, like, that was, I like that more than the clown that was on there saying that he read 2 pages and, the rest of the 13,000 documents, don't waste your time. That's what he's basically saying.
Right.
It's like, come on, buddy. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, you're
worthless hack.
Well, I mean, and you said that, what was it? There was a whole chapter in the Warren Commission dedicated to somebody's shoe size or something, right? Wasn't it?
No, it was Jack Ruby's dental records, Bill. His family dental records, because that's so relevant to the investigation.
Right.
We have to see,
right,
all his dental records from when he was a kid. That's important.
Well, it just goes to show you. I mean, you can't, no matter what channel you're watching, what news channel you're watching, you really have to, you have to go to the experts, right? I mean, these broadcasters are not the experts. You have to really go to the experts.
No, and when they bring a guy on, Bill, you got to realize, who is this guy? What is he getting paid to say?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
But, we'll go through them. I'm going to go through these documents and I'll put together something, and we'll have an episode once I get through information. But, it takes a while to go through these. It's not easy, despite what that pompous ass hack had to say. You know what I mean? It's
right.
It's difficult
and we're
to
not,
go through.
We're not going to break any news on this show. But we're definitely going to, kind of interpret what's out there.
Well, the thing is, Bill, there is some things like you're not going to find a document that's written by Allen Dulles that said I killed JFK.
Right,
I mean, like, come on. But there's important stuff like in the last dump, we talked about, the mayor of Dallas being a CIA asset. That's an important thing in the big picture, and
right.
And there was other things. There was a lot of things on Ruby knowing Oswald and all these witnesses that seen Ruby with Oswald months before.
Mm-hmm.
He ends up shooting and killing him. So that's important. That was in the last dump. So there's always going to be stuff like that. So for this hack to come on and say there's nothing of relevance, and he looked at 2 pages, I mean, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah. Hey, and speaking of Oswald, it's funny because there, recently in the news, and again, we're not gonna take sides. We're not gonna tip our hand here as to where we fall politically or anything like that. And you can infer what you want from what we talk about. Brittany Griner was released from Russian prison. We made the prisoner exchange and brought her back. She, I believe, had to spend a week or so in a facility just to kind of, get her back to reacclimate her, I guess you could say, back into the United States. I don't know exactly what facility it was. I just saw something about it on the news that she had been released from this facility. And, we talked about Oswald coming back from Russia. Did he spend a second in any kind of a facility that would reacclimate him or
No, I'm so glad you brought this up, buddy, because no, I mean, it's ridiculous. Like he basically, like I said before, the State Department gave him money to travel. He had little problem whatsoever getting back into the country. And don't forget, Bill, he brought a Russian girl back with him.
Right.
Who had loose ties. Her family had loose ties to KGB, and this is during the Cold War. And he also, he defected, he was threatened to denounce his citizenship. He threatened to give away secrets because he was stationed at a secret base in Tokyo where they're given where the U-2 spy plane was, and he threatened to give those secrets away, and nothing happens to him. But here's a basketball player, and look at what she went through.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, that's just a great point, Bill, and it shows you everything you need to know about Oswald. And you could go back and see other people that defected and stuff, even in Oswald's time, and you see how much trouble they had getting back in.
Sure.
But Oswald was obviously getting strings pulled, and we know Angleton was controlling all his files, controlling Oswald, and they were pulling strings. So that's a great point, Bill. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I wish I
could see the difference.
I wish I had more information. I wish I had the facts. I've just been looking for it as we speak, and I just can't find.
Well, how long was she over there, Bill?
Well, she was over there for, I don't know, was it a year? I don't even know if it was a year.
It was a long time. I mean, It was a long time. It wasn't,
right.
I'm right back in, and then the State Department gives you money to travel.
Right. But I mean, no one's even suspecting that Brittany Griner would be a Russian spy or anything like that.
I know.
She still had to spend time in one of these facilities just to, I guess, debrief and reacclimate and get her kind of probably just find out everything that she went through. And
Bill, the point is, from the Russian side, the Russians wanted Oswald the hell out of there because they suspected he was a CIA plant right from the beginning.
Yeah. So
the Russians, that's why it was so easy for him to get out from the Russian side. But to get back in American stuff, they wanted him out of there.
Right.
But but it's just unbelievable, the difference that you see.
Unbelievable. All right. Enough of this. Let's get to our topic today. We're talking about Vietnam War. We're going to follow up with some more information.
All right, Bill. So to summarize where we're at, basically, we talked about how, the French were there and they colonized that land a long time ago. And, the 12 years previous to Kennedy coming in, we were up to our eyeballs in Vietnam. and then when Kennedy comes in, he's got problems everywhere. And we ended the show last time. We're up to right before the assassination, the JFK. So that's where we're going to pick it up now, buddy.
Okay.
All right, so let's go at it. So we have Kennedy's plan, NSAM 263 is his withdrawal policy, and that's been fully implemented. Okay, that's in the works, and it's going through the system, and it's going to call for 1,000 advisors. Let me make that clear: advisors. There's no troops in Vietnam at this time. 1,000 advisors a month to be pulled out starting in December 63, with the end result of all U.S. personnel out of Vietnam by 1965. So that's pretty clear to me, Bill. Historians want to put a spin on it. There's nothing to spin on that one. It's pretty clear.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's important at this point is 2 days before Kennedy is assassinated, McGeorge Bundy, Kennedy's national security advisor, writes up a memo that would later become NSAM 273. And Bill, in its original form, and I have a copy of the original form, it was definitely written for Kennedy. What this basically was a extension of 263. It was, how are we going to intensify the war effort, but not Americanizing it? And what I mean by that is, how could we make sure that the resistance, South Vietnam, whatever you want to call them, the resistance against Ho Chi Minh and the communists, how are we going to make sure that they have everything they need, have all the all the money that they need, all the equipment that they need? And, he put this in a plan, and he put in, detailed descriptions of how they should go forward and basically carry on the war without us, because like Kennedy said, it's their war. They're the ones that have to win it or lose it.
Right.
So the thing is, there's no doubt in my mind that the way it was originally written, Kennedy would have signed this, because it doesn't go against NSAM 263 at all. It's basically like an extension of it. But here's what happens, Bill. Kennedy is assassinated, okay? And we talked a little bit about this, about what happens on that weekend. We talked a lot about this, that whole weekend, all the stuff that was going on.
Yeah.
And what happens is, George Bundy takes that report around, and this is where Johnson changes it. And the last paragraphs of the report is where everything was in there about how Bundy wants to intensify the war effort without Americanizing it. Okay. And what happens is, we talked about it. Johnson changes it, and he puts in Plan 34A, which is coming from the military, which was basically Americanizing the war. Okay. Changing the whole idea of how we're going to progress in this.
It's essentially a full reversal of Kennedy.
Full reversal, Bill.
Right.
Full reversal. Let's get into it. Let's go a little specific, because what happens is, there's a professor I talked about a lot, John Newman. He's from James Madison. He did a lot of work on this, and he developed a relationship with McGeorge Bundy and also with Secretary of Defense McNamara. And he interviewed him so many times, and before both of them guys died, they became good friends with Newman. And Newman interviewed Bundy, and he showed him the report, Bill. And he showed him the last paragraphs where there's lines crossed through. And I have the report. I seen the lines crossed out, and this is where they put in that Plan 34A. And Newman says to him, he shows him, he said, "Who did this? Whose writing is that?" And George Bundy says, "I did that. I crossed that out. That's my writing." And Newman says, "Who told you to do that?" And Bundy said, "Johnson did." So there you have it, Bill. Wow. Right from Bundy's mouth.
Yeah.
Lyndon Johnson. And this would have happened, Bill. This would have happened, I believe, that Monday. So Kennedy's killed on the Friday, right?
Right.
Oswald is killed on Sunday. And then Monday's when they have the memorial service for Kennedy, and his body's in a casket. Mm-hmm. And this is that morning of that, before that even happened. And Johnson changes all this. And, it changed the direction of where the war was going.
Not only that, Sean, it changed this country.
We're going to get into that, Bill.
Yeah, of course.
We're going to get into that, because the important thing, Bill, is at that point, Bill, there's zero combat troops in Vietnam, and there's only been around 100 casualties at this point. And that's going all the way back to Eisenhower, Bill, to when we first put advisors over there, you know?
Right.
So look at what's going to happen coming up. I mean, so you're right. It changes everything. So the next thing we're going to get into, Bill, is, what happens is, Kennedy's killed, and then the election coming up, 64, Johnson's saying that, I'm not sending American boys over there to fight a war that Asian boys should be fighting. And here you have the whole thing, Bill, is he had this planned all along. They already have this change memo of 273, NSAM 273. And here's a question for you, Bill. I talked about the military, how they put in this plan behind Kennedy's back, and it kind of just inserted it into the NSAM there. How did the military expect to ever get that by Kennedy? Because remember, this is written well before Kennedy's assassinated. So
yeah,
they had this, they're doing this. How did they ever expect that to happen? Unless they didn't expect him to be president much longer.
Of course.
I mean, that's a question that has to be asked.
Yeah. Kennedy's whole presidency, his whole existence was to keep us out of, going to a war. Right.
I mean, he would exhaust every option, Bill, until it was, there was no other option left to go to war. And the thing is, that was because he was a soldier himself.
Right.
He almost died in combat. He saw a brother die in combat. So he understood what war is all about. So the next thing is the Gulf of Tonkin incident, Bill. And this is where the NSAM 272 comes into play a lot, or 273, I'm sorry. And this is important, Bill. Let me make this very clear. The Gulf of Tonkin resolution was written before the Gulf of Tonkin incident happened. I mean, so right there, that's telling you this is a false flag operation. And it was, to give Johnson a reason to go into Vietnam. And what happened, Bill, with combat troops, what happened was, because of the change in the NSAM, U.S. patrols were able to send in, U.S. ships on patrol to get radar spots in where there was heavy fighting between the North and the South. And this is something that Kennedy tried to avoid, because what could happen. And this is what they were trying to do, Bill, is what they were trying to do was they were actually trying to provoke an incident. Okay. So you had the USS Maddox that got really close to the fighting. And actually, it's now known that the Maddox actually fired a warning shot. So how could this be a sneak attack if we're the ones that actually fired a warning shot? So the Maddox gets hit, and I think it was just one bullet hole. There was no casualties or nothing. And there was a second incident that was a total false flag, where our patrols get really close to the North and the South. We're fighting, and then gunfire happens, and it's a little ways off, but it's close enough where they could radio in and say, hey, we're under attack. We're under attack. Well, if you're getting close to where they're fighting, I mean, come on, you're provoking this whole thing. So then this allows Johnson to send in the first combat troops into Vietnam. And the importance, Bill, is that none of this would have happened if there wasn't that change in the NSAM. You understand what I'm saying? Because our ships would have been nowhere near where the North and the South were fighting. Okay?
Right. Yep.
And then what happens, Bill, is because of this incident, the Gulf of Tonkin, which we now know is a false flag, Johnson says the first combat troops into Vietnam, and this is 1965, and he sends in 5,000 troops. And remember, Kennedy at least 6 times voted against that. He, his advisors were telling him, send in combat troops, and he said no. And here we are, 1965, and 5,000 troops are sent in. And by the end of that year, Bill, the end of 1965, there's 175,000 combat troops, American combat troops in Vietnam. And that's a complete, because of the complete change in the NSAM.
Right.
So historians that want to overlook that and say it's not important. And, at this point, we're going to have to talk about that Ken Burns documentary that he did on Vietnam, because he totally skips over this whole period in history when he's talking about the Vietnam War. He just totally doesn't mention the NSAM 263, doesn't mention Edmund Gulliam meeting with Kennedy. and his feelings in Vietnam. And how could you make a documentary on Vietnam and you just skip over this important piece of history, Bill? And then this leads to the Rolling Thunder campaign, which was the biggest bombing campaign ever. And I ask you again, Bill, who are we bombing? Like, it's not like we're fighting Hitler here and we know where he has bunkers, and we're in Europe and you could bomb his bunker, and
Right.
we're bombing the jungles here.
Yeah.
We're fighting a guerrilla army,
Yeah.
with a conventional style war, and it just doesn't work. What happens now, Bill, is America goes into, or the U.S. is really fighting the Vietnam War on two fronts. We have the conventional war, where we have our boys over there in the jungles fighting a conventional army war, ground war, infantry war against the guerrilla army, okay? And then we have the CIA's war. And this is where we're going to talk about Operation Phoenix, the Phoenix program, okay? Which basically from 67 to like 68, the CIA was sending in Vietnamese intelligence people, military people, police, and even civilians. And what they were doing, Bill, is it was a lot of propaganda. It was a lot of operations like staging attacks and making it look like it was the Viet Cong attacking villages and trying to, stir public opinion. But basically the CIA is trying to fight a covert war against the guerrilla army, which in a lot of ways actually is a little bit more effective than trying to fight a regular infantry war. And this is where guys like General Lansdale, that we talked a lot about.
Right.
Remember, Kennedy pushed him out because of the lies he was telling in Vietnam. And
Yeah.
he's the one that created that fake state of South Vietnam. Well, now he's working at the embassy in Saigon, and he's under some cover title over there, but he's really running black ops. And another CIA guy by the name of David Morales, whose name pops up in the Kennedy assassination talks, because he worked at the JM Wave station down in Miami, where they were trying to kill Fidel Castro. So that's where these guys come into play, Bill, and they're running all these kind of operations over there. And, this is going on for quite a while. And then at this point, it's important here to insert the name Katharine Graham, because we talked about, Tom Hanks made her out to be the hero of the movie The Post. And at this point, she's writing all kind of articles that Lyndon Johnson and his people are giving to her. She's writing a lot of them verbatim and saying how the war is effective, we're liberating the people over there, all this stuff. And this whole time, she's accepting or promoting the war for Lyndon Johnson. And Tom Hanks makes a hero out of her in the movie by saying she was so outraged at the stuff that came out with the Pentagon Papers and this and that. But for this whole time period, from like 65 to the end of Johnson's tenure, she supported the Vietnam War, Bill.
Mm.
So, and at this point, let's get into.
But John, let me just ask you,
ahead.
What was she told?
Well, what was she told? She was told what Lyndon Johnson wanted her to hear, Bill. She was told that the war is going great. We're liberating the people. We're winning the war, which is ridiculous because we were never winning the war.
Right.
She was also told that, most of the people support what we're doing over there. Like most of the Vietnamese people want us there, and they want our help. And that wasn't true, because like 75% of the people supported Ho Chi Minh.
Right.
But again, Bill, she's not doing her own homework as a journalist. All she's doing is accepting what Lyndon Johnson's telling her. Remember that quote I said? Lyndon Johnson said, Katharine Graham is worth more to him than 2 battalion units in Vietnam. Because that's how important it was for Johnson to get this spin out, to kind of keep public opinion. Because at this point, it hasn't spiraled, Bill, like it's gonna. And this is the reason why, because she's out there saying, the war effort is going great. We're liberating the people, and it's just complete nonsense.
Right. Yeah.
So at this point, let's bring up a name, Bill, that we mentioned before, and that's Carlos Hathcock, because I think it's important to talk about him. And we mentioned him. Remember, I said he was the sniper and that after Vietnam, he set up what the Warren Commission said happened.
Right.
And
he disproved it.
He said, there's no way Oswald did it because he couldn't do it.
Right.
But anyway, Bill, this guy was so effective as a sniper. I mean, you know, he had 95 confirmed kills in Vietnam. Now, whether you're a gun guy or not, I mean, the skill this guy had with a rifle was amazing. And the thing is, the way I understand it, how they did it then, I don't know how they do it right now, but a confirmed kill, you had to have the sniper, a spotter, and then like an independent third witness to be a confirmed kill. Well, a lot of times Carlos Hathcock was sent on suicide missions. So he didn't have two people to confirm it. So when the totals that I heard, he had like over 300 kills in Vietnam, sniper kills. And he was so effective that the Viet Cong put a contract on him. And they used to call him white feather because they said like you could drop a feather, a white feather, and it would hit the ground before you would hear Carlos Hathcock coming.
Wow.
And one of the most amazing stories of this guy is there was a female general for the Viet Cong, and she was vicious, Bill. She was capturing American soldiers and castrating them and using the guillotine and torturing them. I mean, it just, the stories you heard of the torture was just unbelievable. And Hathcock was sent on a suicide mission to take her out. And there's all kind of reports about how long he was crawling through the high grass in Vietnam. Now, the grass there, Bill, could be up to your knees or even a little higher, depending on how tall you are.
Right, yeah.
And he crawled, they said, I heard different numbers, but the most consistent number is he was 30 hours on his stomach, Bill, crawling through the grass, high grass of Vietnam.
Wow.
Now, it's not like there's a place he could pull over the restroom, you know what I mean? I mean, and just imagine the snakes and the spiders you would see in the high grass there. I mean, it's just, but anyway, picture this scene. So the female general is held up in this like kind of hut in the high grass, and she's surrounded by like 50 soldiers protecting her. And Hathcock is crawling through the grass and he's setting up, and he waits until she comes out of the hut. And when she comes out, he gets her with a headshot. Guy never misses. Takes her out. And then he has to turn around, Bill, and crawl back out. And he's got soldiers running around. I mean, they could step on him. They're all around him.
Yeah.
And he's in the high grass and they're wondering where the shot came from. And this guy took the shot, killed her. And then he turned around and crawled out. He was, the whole thing, by the time it was done, 30 hours, Bill, on his stomach, crawling out of there. Just incredible. I mean, this guy, you want to talk about a hero.
Yeah.
Whatever you think about the war, I mean, Carlos Hathcock was a hero, you know? So then at this point, you know, we also have to talk a little bit about what else is going on there with the CIA in the Air America involving drugs, Bill, in the Golden Triangle. And the CIA, there's no doubt about this now, you know, they were involved in sending the drugs, and there was rumors about, you know, they were sending drugs in the bodies of dead Americans in the body bags. I couldn't really find anything to confirm that, you know, but I do know that the evidence that, you know, the CIA was running drugs, I mean, that's overwhelming. There's no doubt about that. And so the war intensifies, Bill. And like I said, you have it on two fronts now. You have the CIA fighting their war, and you have the American infantry fighting their war. And, you know, it's really a civil war down that we created the South, and they're fighting the North. And then in 1968, you have the Tet Offensive, okay? And this is when TV really took over, Bill, because this was the first time when the war was really showing on television, because this is where, you know, the reporters were going over there. Now it's common to see reporters in different places where combat's going on. But at this point, it wasn't. And the Tet Offensive, Bill, the Viet Cong basically raided every major city in Vietnam. There's no way to sugarcoat it. I mean, they were coming at us everywhere. And there was even, you know, TV had pictures of them inside our own embassy and chasing guys down and stuff. And it's like, we can't even protect our own embassy. This is going brutal. I mean, everything is going against us. We're not winning this war. And again, this is where, you know, Katharine Graham is out there saying we're winning it. And then all of a sudden on TV, people could see for themselves, you know, this is not going good.
Right.
So Johnson calls a meeting with his advisors and people from the Pentagon. And he actually tries to say that we won the Tet Offensive because we killed more of them than they killed of us. But I mean, at this point, it's just ridiculous, and I think it's also good to point at this point, a lot of Kennedy's people that stayed on, like George Ball and Pierre Salinger and John McCone, who was a CIA director after Dulles, McGeorge Bundy, McNamara, Secretary of Defense. I mean, all these guys at some point leave the Johnson administration, including Bobby Kennedy. We talked about him. He stayed on, to make sure that JFK's civil rights actions get passed. But all these guys backed out the Johnson administration at some point. And this is when, MLK, Martin Luther King, and Bobby Kennedy really start protesting the war, and really it was the My Lai massacre, Bill. We could talk, you could do a whole show on that. People could look that up, but, they just had there was accusations of American Army people. They were raping civilians and killing civilians. And the thing is, when Martin Luther King saw the pictures of that, he was so outraged, Bill. He was so outraged. And it brought him to tears when he saw what was going on. And this is where he starts to really, really speak out against the Vietnam War. And what happens is, at the same time, the CIA is running Operation Chaos and the FBI is running Operation COINTELPRO, which are both go against to attack left-wing groups in the United States. And one of the things they were attacking was the American Civil Rights Movement. And they were really, really attacking them with a lot of times illegal wiretaps, Bill. They were infiltrating them and trying to stir up problems inside the organization, like they did with the Black Panthers. And, this was going on. They're really coming after Martin Luther King. And at this point, Johnson administration really turns on him. Okay. And he's speaking out against it. And Richard Helms at the CIA, he's the director now. He gets a report from J. Edgar Hoover. And basically J. Edgar Hoover, and this is his exact words, Bill, he calls Martin Luther King a national security threat. Okay.
Wow.
Now, yeah. Can you imagine that? It's unbelievable. But the point is that Hoover knows exactly what he's doing when he says this to Helms, when he gives this report to Helms, because any report that comes across Helms' desk and somebody's listed as a national security threat, 99% of the time that person is taken out. I mean, that's how effective Helms was at taking out his enemies. So Hoover knows what he's stirring up here, what he's doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
So at this point, what happens? Martin Luther King's assassinated, right?
Yep.
And then Bobby Kennedy, well, before that, what happens, Bill, is I'm going to backtrack a little bit. Lyndon Johnson backs out of the race for 68. He's had enough. He says, when Bobby enters, I think that was the last straw. Johnson said he's not going to run. But then Johnson, in his last days in office, he starts working on a peace process. And we'll talk more about this in the Watergate episodes. But it was a lady by the name of Anna Chennault that ended up sabotaging the peace talks between the North and the South. And what happened is Richard Nixon got her to sabotage these peace talks, so it would hurt Humphrey, it would hurt the Democrats, and, it would be easier for him to be president. And, we hammered Johnson on this show. I mean, I didn't pull any punches on him, but it seems to me like he was really, at this point, he understood that he got us so deep into Vietnam. At one point, there's going to be 500,000 ground troops put there by Lyndon Johnson, Bill. 500,000.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think once he realizes he's not going to run for president again, he really wants to end this. And I think he really worked on the peace process to try to end this. And, Nixon goes ahead and sabotages it. The same Richard Nixon who advised sending in ground troops to Eisenhower.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So And then another thing that happens is right after that, well, then you have we'll go back to the Martin Luther King's assassinated. Okay. Bobby Kennedy's assassinated. And then you have the whole riots at the Democratic National Convention, the anti-war protesters. And then at the end there, you have Ho Chi Minh dies 1969. So at this point, Bill, this is when the anti-war movement is really starting to ramp up, and it's really starting to hit home. And Nixon is president now, and him and Kissinger start bombing supply routes in Laos and Cambodia, okay, that the North Vietnamese were using. And this has expanded the war to 2 more countries. And Nixon actually ends up sending in more bombs than LBJ did, Bill, if you could imagine that.
Mm.
Yeah, and it was, he actually did. Nixon does start to pull out some of the troops at this point. So he reduces the ground force, okay, but he increases the air support and the air campaign. So we're pulling out the troops, but we're bombing more. And then when he starts bombing in Cambodia, this is where Pol Pot comes into play. And Pol Pot, I don't even know how to explain him, but I'm sure you read about him, but he's a complete maniac. And he's basically trying to restructure the whole society there in Cambodia.
Right.
And he starts a genocide there. And he's a butcher, and all these people are getting slaughtered. And it's just a total disaster. I mean, so at this point, we've extended the war to Laos and Cambodia, and now back home is when it really starts the anti-war movement is really starting to ramp up, Bill. So do you have any questions up to this point?
Well, it's the anti-war movement, and it's also the civil rights movement. I think that you can't talk about one without the other, because they're so important to each other. And I don't know that the civil rights movement would have been as successful if we didn't have all of these people also protesting the war in Vietnam.
Well, that's a good point, Bill. Yeah, I agree with you totally. And again, that's because Martin Luther King starts to change his direction. Because at this point, before that, MLK he didn't really want to say much about Vietnam, because he knew what would happen. He knew he would make the Johnson administration an enemy of his, and he was trying to work with them. And he didn't want to speak up. But after the My Lai massacre, and he saw those pictures, he said, I couldn't stay silent anymore. So that's when he gets involved. And he was really, if anybody wants to read some of the stuff that MLK said, he really, really hammered the Johnson administration on what they were doing in Vietnam, and this is where, Hoover and Helms, claim him to be a national security threat. But you're right, Bill, the civil rights movement is definitely tied to the anti-war movement, but there was also a lot of violence coming from the anti-war movement too, right. Bill.
Oh, sure there was.
And you had groups like the Weather Underground, which, they took their name from the Bob Dylan lyrics, where he said, it doesn't take a weatherman to know which way the wind blows. They were responsible for bombings all over the country. And, we'll talk about that more because, Watergate ties into this, because this is where, Daniel Ellsberg leaks the Pentagon Papers, and this is where, guys, fanatics like G. Gordon Liddy start seeing the Weather Underground kind of like, like there's a civil war in America, like they're attacking the country that he loves. He don't see what, he doesn't see the anti-war movement, in any validity. He sees them as attacking his country. And it's important, Bill, at this point to note that the Pentagon Papers were written by Secretary of Defense McNamara. And we talked about McNamara. He's such an interesting character because he was Kennedy's key guy on withdrawing the advisors. He was helping Kennedy push that agenda.
Right.
But then when he takes over, when he stays on for Lyndon Johnson, he becomes Johnson's key guy, like as the hot guy on getting into Vietnam and staying in there. We got to stay in until we win. So it's interesting. And I think that's just, McNamara was the good soldier that's going to follow his leader, and whatever his leader wants, that's what he's going to do. But I think it ruined McNamara. I mean, he basically drank himself to death, Bill.
Oh, gee, wow.
Yeah, it tore him up, Bill. And like I said, John Newman interviewed him and became friends with him, and he had long interviews with him, and it tore him to pieces, what was going on over there. And this is why I think he wrote the Pentagon Papers, because he wanted the truth out.
Yeah.
And, the Pentagon Papers then by Daniel Ellsberg, who was a NSA analyst, he leaked the Pentagon Papers, and he didn't do it to the Post, despite what Hank said. He did it to the New York Times first, then he gave it to the Post. And, it came out all these atrocities that were going on in Vietnam, all that was happening, and the fact that we weren't winning this war, we're killing a lot of civilians. And we knew what was going on at home. It was ripping the country apart at the seams at home. And interesting thing, when the New York Times printed that, there was a bunch of pages left out of that on Kennedy's withdrawal policy, which is kind of interesting, because Ellsberg did leak that. He did leak the part about Kennedy wanting to withdraw. But New York Times and the Post, they never printed that. So at this point, Bill, the war is just raging. And, then we get to we're into the 70s now. So you have the whole Watergate thing going on. And we're going to do episodes on Watergate. And we'll talk more about how that ties into everything. Because I think it ties into the way, like, some of these fanatics like Liddy were thinking.
Mm-hmm. And
of course, Nixon sets the plumbers up because he wanted to plug leaks that were coming from Ellsberg about what was coming out about Vietnam. And the interesting thing, Bill, is all that information was really stuff that was happening during the Johnson administration, most of it. You know what I mean? It wasn't even Nixon.
Yeah.
But Nixon was so, he did not want any of this bad press out there. So then we get into the 70s, the war's raging. And then in 73, you have the Paris Peace Accords. And then you saw all U.S. forces withdraw. But then the accords are broken and the fighting continues. And then finally, Bill, Saigon falls and the war's over. And we ended up losing the war. The North and South would later reunite. And what was really accomplished over there, Bill? The country was almost torn apart at the seams.
Yeah.
The numbers on the deaths over there, is amazing. 58,000 American soldiers were killed. 300,000 other serious casualties, and all the missing in action. I mean, the missing in action numbers, you can never get a correct total on that. Who knows how many, but there was a report that was recently put out by a British medical group, and they did a study, and they went to villages in Vietnam and all through Southeast Asia. They asked each village, they went house to house, Bill, and they went and they said, how many people did you lose in Vietnam? And they came up with a total that was way, way more than what the Defense Department said. Okay. And their total was that 4 million people were killed in Vietnam, Bill. 4 million Vietnamese were killed. There's only 30 million people in the country, Bill.
Yeah, that's amazing. Unbelievable.
And
Sean, and you think,
go ahead, but before you get to that, Bill, and then you have to also include 2 million Cambodians were killed, 300,000 killed in Laos. And then you also have to include Indonesia, because we talked about the coup in Indonesia that's in that part of the world that Allen Dulles and the CIA inspired, and 1.5 million people were killed in that coup. So when you start adding up all the numbers, you're talking about 7 million people, Bill.
And then you think about the thousands and thousands of soldiers who made it home, whose lives were just destroyed.
They actually never they physically came home, Bill, but
Right.
they mentally they didn't.
Right.
And the government didn't do anything to help them.
Nothing.
Nothing. And that war basically defined the country for how many years? 25 years?
Yeah. Yeah. You could say that for sure.
And it's just, it's just amazing though when you hear those numbers though, Bill, and that country was destroyed. That part of the world was destroyed. And this part of the country, our country was destroyed.
Yeah.
I mean, it was ripped apart at the seams. Like, we don't remember any of that. We were too young. But I talked to, my dad and my uncles, and I talked to Vietnam vets and people, who lived that. And it was unbelievable, Bill, the stories you hear about. It was basically like a civil war being fought again at the home front here.
Yeah. Yeah.
But to summarize, Bill, I think it's important that I hope we accomplished a couple of things here, Bill, with this 2-part series on Vietnam, because historians really like to a lot of them spin their own side of what happened there in Vietnam. And it's important to remember everything we talked about. The first president that put money into Vietnam was President Truman. The first president to put advisors into Vietnam was President Eisenhower. The first president to put combat troops into Vietnam was President Johnson. And then Richard Nixon would expand the war to Laos and Cambodia. He would reduce the number of troops, but he would increase the air power.
Yeah.
Okay. And it was important to understand that JFK, he did increase the advisors, but we talked about, he walked into a mess and he really had no choice but to do that. But then he was withdrawing the advisors, and that's a fact. And then when he's assassinated, the whole policy changes. So when there's young people out there listening to us now, when you hear somebody trying to teach that, JFK got us into Vietnam, that is such a gross lie. And it aggravates me, Bill. Because you could obviously see that, JFK was the one president that was trying to get us out of this mess.
Right.
Yeah. And it's just, I hope we accomplished, if we didn't accomplish anything else, but I hope we accomplished that.
I think we did. Yeah.
People understand, go back and read the documentation. This is why I got so mad at that Ken Burns documentary that everybody said was so great. I didn't feel it was great, Bill. I don't know how you felt about it. Did you watch it?
I've never seen it. I did see the Oliver Stone documentary where he covers Vietnam, but I can't recall, but I don't think I ever saw the Ken.
Well, Oliver Stone was there, Bill. He fought in Vietnam.
Yeah, that's right.
So I mean, when you hear Oliver Stone talk, I mean, he's talking from experience.
Right, yeah.
He was over there.
That's right.
But I mean, that documentary, though, to just skip over, basically they just went from, Eisenhower to Kennedy to Johnson, and it's just like there's no change, and we're just streaming along, and the war's intensifying, and it was just, I don't think General Lansdale was ever mentioned in that documentary. I mean, how could you leave him out? He had such an impact in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And we didn't really talk about Westmoreland. He was a general over there for a long time. He had a lot of impact on what was going on there, but Bill, it was just, it had to be the worst foreign policy disaster in U.S. history. I don't know how anybody could spin it any different. What happened over there.
And for what? I mean, it accomplished, like you said, Sean.
Well, you know what? It accomplished a lot for David Rockefeller, because I know he made a lot of money. But after that, what did it accomplish, Bill? And tell me what it accomplished.
Nothing. That's all it was. It was to feed that machine, to feed that war machine. Yeah,
and it kept going, and all those boys were sent over there, drafted, and like you said, Bill, a lot of them they never really came back, even the ones that came home.
Yeah,
they're all messed up, and a lot of got into drugs, and we know the CIA was running drugs all over the Golden Triangle there.
Yeah,
and
it was a lot of black kids. It was a lot of poor kids.
Sure, it wasn't a lot of senators' kids that were getting drafted.
That's for sure. And it was people that the government deemed to be expendable.
Yeah, pretty
No.
much.
I mean, that's
And then they didn't take care of them when they came home after
No.
doing that. So again, Bill, when we say stuff, we're against the war, this and that, we never say anything. We're against the soldiers.
yeah,
Soldiers should be the
absolutely.
heroes, and that's why I wanted to make
Absolutely.
that point about Carlos Hatcock. Because he's the skill that man had with a rifle is just amazing.
Yeah, yeah,
But it was just a war, and we mentioned, uncles that I had that were over there, and my dad was in Vietnam during that time, and Uncle Murph, and it was just, my Uncle Frank. I mean, all the kids that were drafted, whether they've seen combat or not, the ones that seen combat, Bill, it was just, be thrown in the jungles like that. And then they're dropping bombs all around you.
chaos, absolute
Chaos, total chaos,
Yep.
and remember what, the French told John Foster Dulles. We got our troops in the jungles there. You want us to drop a bomb and kill our own troops?
Yeah.
Well, what was Nixon doing? He was dropping bombs all around where, even though he reduced the amount of soldiers, we still had soldiers in the jungles there.
Sure.
So yeah, Bill, this was, I did a lot of research on this, and, Vietnam is something that that war was really important to me to set the record straight, because I think it's just such a point of, it just aggravates me so much how people twist the truth on this whole thing. And there's people out there that say, maybe we didn't do enough to win the war. Are you kidding me? Like, just the spin on this, it just drives me crazy, buddy.
Yeah.
Just drives me crazy. So I hope we set a little bit of the record straight tonight, buddy.
I think we did. I think we did a good. You did a great job, Sean. A lot of, once again, thorough, just great information and stuff that people need to hear.
They do, Bill. And again, it's the documentation. If people don't like the stuff that I'm saying, well, that's fine. You could disagree with me all you want, but I'll tell you where to find the documentation. You want to look up NSTAMP 263, you can read it for yourself.
Right. Sure.
You want to see that original document of 273 where Bundy crosses out the paragraphs at the end. I could show it to you. I'll send it to you if you want it. And you can see where the policy was reversed. So this was a good one, buddy.
Yeah, this was a great one. Good job, Sean. Really, really good again. And then, as you said, we're going to start our series on Watergate coming up. That'll be interesting, and a lot to talk about, a lot to sort through there. So,
and it ties into, a lot of what we were saying here, a lot of this
Definitely.
was going on during that time period. And
yeah, a lot of great stuff to come this year. I think we're just getting started in the new year. We're just getting started in our podcast, and there'll be a lot of great shows yet to come. So,
and we just try to tell the facts, Billy.
That's it.
Go kill the messenger, right?
We're just bringing the truth. That's it. That's all we're doing. So if you like what you're hearing, I would ask that you continue to listen, that you subscribe, and that you find us wherever you get your podcasts. We're on YouTube. You can look us up on Facebook and Twitter and all that kind of social media stuff. As long as that's still going strong, we'll still be a part of it.
Hey, and if anybody wants to look up more on Carlos Hatcock, you can find it on YouTube. There's a lot of information on Carlos, but there's a lot of interviews with him that you could get. Just an interesting guy, and like I said, he's a hero. He should be hailed as a hero.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Sean. Great show.
All right, buddy.
All right, we'll see you next time, and that's
enough out of you.
Good night.
All right, buddy. Good night.
Take care.